Okay. We'll put the title on. Remember what the title was for the first year? I know the title, but you don't remember? Okay.
No.
Anyone remember? Anyone? What's the official title for the first year? See if anyone remembers.
Something about the holidays.
Yeah, the holidays in Parshat Emor. Now, give me 2 reasons why I would have picked that topic for this week. One is easy. It's this week's Parshat is Emor, and the holiday season, we're smack in the middle of it. We're counting the days, the weeks, etc. Now, if you're studying Shulchan Aruch, like the Jewish law book, and want to find the laws about the holidays, where would you look? In what section? Remember, there's 4 pillars. What pillar of the 4 pillars of Shulchan Aruch would you look at? Yeah, why would you look at Orach Chaim? Because that's where it makes sense. That's part of your day-to-day life. Now, if I'm studying the laws, let's say of Pesach and Chag HaMatzot, where would I expect to find the laws of Shavuot? Right afterwards, right? And like sort of goes in order, nice and organized. Okay. Let's say I would do something like really strange and look for the original source where we first find out about the holidays. What book would that be in? What general book would that be in? What book came before Shulchan Aruch? The Torah, right? Now, there's 5 books last count in Chumash. That's why it's called Chumash. Now, what book of Chumash would you expect to find? Like, remember, there's 4 books of Shulchan Aruch, or 4 pillars, 4 sections. So Orach Chaim makes sense. If I'm looking for holidays, I have 5 books. Which of the 5 books would you expect to find the holidays in? I know where they are, but where would you expect to find it? Now, the question is more important than the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah?
No.
You understand why the question's important?
Is it Vayikra?
No, I didn't ask where they are. I asked where would you expect to find them? Yeah. Okay, now, why in Shemot? What's Sefer Shemot about? And no, Sefer Shemot. There's one big thing. It's called covenant, because it starts in Breshit at the seed level, and the covenant. It's God takes us out of Egypt in order to go to Har Sinai to make a covenant, and we break the covenant. In case you've read about it, we renegotiate a new covenant. We get a second one, and then we get a symbol of the covenant. And the book's over when the Shekhinah returns. I just explained the Ramban, the first Ramban in Shemot, basically. Now, if the holidays have something to do with the covenant, I would expect to find holidays in Shemot. Okay? Now, what's Vayikra about? Not pretty much Korbanot Mishkan. Now, on the holidays, there's definitely Korbanot, I think. So I would expect to find something about them in Vayikra, okay, which we're going to find today. What's Bamidbar is more about, like traveling through the desert, etc. I wouldn't expect to find holidays there, but we will, won't we? Okay. Devarim. If you think it's a repeat of Chumash, so then of course I'll find a repeat, or something like that. But guess what we're going to find? We're going to find holidays in Shemot. We're going to find them in Vayikra. We're going to find them in Bamidbar, and we're going to find them in Devarim. Will there be exactly the same details in each book? No. No, we're going to find different details of the holidays. They're going to overlap. For sure they're going to overlap. But each book has different details that has to do with the theme of that book. Make sense? So we're going to focus primarily on Parshat Emor, but I wanted to see everything except for Emor to appreciate what's in Emor. You with me? Now, the so-called holidays, by the way, everyone should have a chumash. I'll give a source sheet, but everyone should have a chumash like this, like 5 books. There's a whole bunch of them around there. You can pass them around over there. There's a whole pack over there, and there should be packs over here. Yeah, I brought a whole bunch here. You can follow the shit without it, but it'll definitely help if you have it. And if you have anyone over 65 needs a bigger size. Okay, let's see an eye doctor or have a magnifying glass. Okay, 65. Okay, now. There's 2 groups of holidays we're all familiar with, right? What's the first main group? It's called the Shalosh Regalim. And then what's the other group we call them? We call the high holidays, right? Now, if someone asked you, what are the Shalosh Regalim, what would you instinctively answer? You would say Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, right? Everyone knows that. Now, remember Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Now, anyone knows where's the first time we find the Shalosh Regalim as a unit? That was, we have Passover coming out of Egypt in Parshat Bo. But is there anywhere in Chumash, where's the first time in Chumash where I present the Shlosh Regalim as a unit? It's for sure in Emor. But they're not called Shlosh Regalim in Emor. What? In Mishpatim. Now, are they called Shlosh Regalim or Shlosh Pamim? Does it say Regalim or not? No, in Shlosh Regalim or Pamim? In Musaf we say Shlosh Pamim B'Shana. Okay. So open up Sefer Shmot, Perach Gimel. Perach Gimel. You know what? Open up Sefer Shmot, Perach, because that's a little more familiar with. Remember Shmot, Perach? Yeah, how come Perach is so famous? Perach and Shmot? The Dibrot. Now, if you were there probably, you might remember. And at a certain point, you all got really scared. Now, what? Remember why you got all scared? So Chumash says because of this, you got scared. The real reason was, what was number 10? You know, I can live with lo tirtzach, all the thing. But lo tachmod, then they lose over. That's a little joke to wake you up. No, it says they got scared afterwards, and then after the Dibrot. And then the people stand and say what? Moshe, we want to hear from you. And then look just real carefully in Pasuk Yotet in Perachap. At the very end, the last Aliyah in Parshat Yitro, God tells Moshe, now that Moshe is getting the laws for the people, what does God tell Moshe? Kol Tomar, you see that in Pasuk Yotet? Right? Go tell the following to the Jewish people. And we have a set of laws, 3 chapters of laws that follow the 10 Commandments, okay? Called Parshat Mishpatim, even though it begins in the end of Yitro. Remember, God begins talking to Moshe Rabbeinu in the end of Parshat Yitro, Kol Tamar, B'yom Hashem Moshe Kol Tamar. Got it? First law is about how not to serve God. How don't you serve God? You know, don't make idols out of me, out of gold. How should you serve God? Keep it simple. Mizbach Adama. Want to go fancy? Mizbach Avanim. Fine, but not, just simple stones. Got it? And then we get to how to treat your slaves or your house elves, and then a whole set of what's called jurisprudence or whatever it's called, laws for Beit Din. Remember? It's called Nizikin. It's when one person injures another person, when your property injures somebody, something you own, or somebody knows basically you're responsible for your deeds. Basically a set of laws that goes to the, and then a set of ethical laws, how to treat other people, returning lost items, not taking bribes and things like that. And the grand finale of that unit, after 3 chapters of between men and fellow men, we get the Shalosh Regalim. Got it? That's what's important. Now, look at Chav Gimel, in Perach Chav Gimel. We're just going to start from Pasuk Zayin, because it's Halach L'Maisa. Not really. Right. Perach Chav Gimel, Pasuk Zayin. I want to see how we flow into, it's like a little Parshiada, how we flow into the holidays. Okay? We're getting some real, core ethical laws that Beit Din can't punish. It's up to you. What's the first one? Pasuk Zayin, Bidvar Sheker Terchak. Yeah, we don't paskin that way, do we? Okay? Definitely we don't, Pasuk we don't paskin by. V'shochad lo tikach, because it wouldn't affect us. Because we're not tzaddikim. Because ki hashochet yaver nei tzaddikim. So if we're not tzaddikim, it's okay. Okay? Now, Pasuk tet we definitely don't hold by. Okay? Because we don't care about gerim. But it says we should. Okay? Unless you say maybe they're converse, if you can argue how to translate it. And you of all people should know that. Because you were strangers in Egypt. Got that? And then we have Shemitah for the first time. But the reason for Shemitah now is what? No, the reason for Shemitah, even though it's between God and man, it's for man and man. And to our surprise in Pasuk Yibet, we have Shabbat. For what reason? Not to remember creation, but to remember, give your workers a day of rest. Just like the 10 Commandments in Dvarim. No, it's even the laws between God and man are also between man and man. Okay? And then the grand finale will be the Shalosh Regalim. But look at the introduction to them. Look in Pasuk Yud Gimel. See, Pasuk Yudal is Shalosh Regalim. Agreed? That's the famous one. You understand? The whole unit begins, it's called an envelope unit. It begins with how to serve God and ends with how to serve God. And in between is how to treat your fellow man. Now, you understand the envelope structure? That might be teaching you something, which is unique to Judaism or special compared to other religions. The main way you serve God is how you treat your fellow man. Of course, you need ritual and temples and holidays, etc. but by enveloping all the laws between man and his fellow man with laws of how to serve God, you could suggest that's carrying a message. Because some people hold that every other human being is actually in the image of God. At least humans. It says that somewhere, that God made man b'tselem Elokim. So it could be the way you treat your fellow man who's b'tselem Elokim might even be considered between God and man as well. Now back to, but look in Pasuk Yudal is the Shlosh Regalim. Look at the transition line. What's it say? U'v'chol asher matchem tishameru. What's that mean? Everything I told you, listen to. And then v'shem, what do we say here? Elohim, because it's other gods. It's plural, right? Don't you dare mention the names of other gods. Tishameru. And what's it say? Okay. V'shem taskiru. Like Voldemort. Don't let the word come out of your mouth. No. Instead, who are these other gods we're talking about? I'll give you a little hint. Look at Pasach Chaf when the holidays are over. Like 3 times. What's God going to promise? I'm sending you to the promised land, right? Because they're about to go to the promised land. In the promised land, there's other gods. Who are the gods in the promised land? Who are the gods of Canaan? The Chumash doesn't like so well. Remember, there's a rain god, fertility god, Asherah, grain gods, etc. Like the ancient gods. And if you wanted your crops to grow properly, what would you need to do? Pray to those gods. Okay? We have this new idea. There's one God in charge of all the powers of nature. And therefore, if you want the powers of nature to be on your side, on the critical times of the agricultural year, I don't want to see you in their temples. Got it? I want to see you where? In my office. Got my point? In other words, I want to show you that to appreciate Shalosh Regalim in Pasuk Yudalad, you have to understand the context from Pasuk Yud Gimel. In other words, everything I just told you in the last 3 chapters of how to behave as a Jew, make sure to keep. And don't you dare mention the names of other gods. Instead, you take this. Instead, come to me 3 times a year. What are the 3 times of the year? Chag HaMatzot in the spring. Chag Aviv is when the grain harvest begins. And then Chag HaKatzir, okay, when you take in your grain harvest. And Chag HaSif at the end of the fruit harvest in the fall. Got it? Those in the land of Israel, I'm sure you're aware, there's only 1 season of crops a year because of the rain, because there's no rain in the summer. Grain is only 2 months a year. I'm sure you remember, from mid-April to mid-June. And then we have the fruit season. And then that's over in the summer. And the end of the summer, September, October, maybe some grapes, finally with the olives. And by October, we're worried about next year's rains already. Got it? And therefore, the first time we have holidays, they're agricultural, because everyone has agricultural holidays. But the main message of the agricultural holiday is, who's in charge of your agriculture? The one God, right? And don't turn to the other gods, turn to your God. And don't just pray to him for rain, but remember what? If you want rain, right? Don't just come to me to remember that based on what will I give you rain, based on your keeping the 3 chapters of Parshat Mishpatim. Got my point? You mumble something very similar when you say the second Parshat of Kriyat Shema every day, but we don't pay attention to that. Okay, no. Because you're chayav to say it, but you have to really internalize it. No. Back to, what do we do? Oh, I'm sorry. You understand why I'm making a big point about agriculture? Now, is there anywhere in Chumash that tells us that all these powers of nature, the sun, the moon, fertility, vegetation, all stem from one God and not many gods? Yeah. That's chapter 1 in Breshit. And is the number 7 a big theme in that story of creation? No. If I have the number 7, which is a not very unnatural number compared to 4 or 6 or 5, if I have a number 7, an idea of a week, whenever I'm going to have the concept of a week, it's going to be to remember that what appears to be many powers is really one power. And God made man in his image for a purpose. Got that? So don't be surprised whenever I find agricultural holidays, what's going to be the big number? 7. How many days is Chag HaMatzot in the Aviv? 7 days. Why 7 days? Ask the average yeshiva bacher, why is Chag HaMatzot 7 days? What will he tell you? Because what happened on day 7? Kriyat Yam Suf. It doesn't say that in Chumash, and the commandment was given way before we left Egypt even. But it's 7 days Chag HaMatzot because Chag HaMatzot in the Aviv is 7 days. Then we count 7 weeks of our grain harvest. Right? And we have a holiday, and what do we name the holiday? Weeks. Now we're celebrating weeks and the concept of weeks because our grain harvest is going to be our staple for the whole year. Okay? And then what happens next? That's the wrong one. That's not good. I just want to give it for here. Okay. Here's more over there. Here, take right there. Now, so that's 7 weeks, and then Chag HaSukkot is how many days? Or Chag HaSif is how many days? Why? You understand? All the holidays are 7. That has to be connected. So I'm saying, even if there weren't any historical events, it would make sense to have agricultural holidays without any connection to historical events. But what did God do? God orchestrated our exodus from Egypt to coincide with the spring. Remember how Yom Atem Yotzim B'Chodesh Aviv. And then I think God orchestrated that we received the Torah at pretty much the same time. Remember Zman Matan Torotenu. Not maybe on the exact day, but at the same time of year as our grain harvest. Right? And then he asks us to remember a whole desert experience every year when we bring out our thing. So that was my introduction of why the number 7 is so important. And agricultural holidays, the first presentation, the only thing God's telling you to do is on the critical times of the agricultural year, I want to see you in my office. Now, I can worry about the upcoming season. I can bite my nails. And that's Chag Aviv. Right before the grain harvest starts, I'm worried stiff. When it's over, I have to say thank you. Got that? So when it's over, I say thank you for the grain harvest, and I'm worried about my fruit harvest. When my fruit harvest is over, I say thank you for the Asif, and I'm worried about next year's rain season. That's called the high holidays. So Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is looking forward to the rainy season that's going to come and determine next year's outcome. Chag HaSif is thanking God for last year. I understand what's happening all the time? Now, and therefore the holidays have one element of worrying about what's coming up and thanking for what we have. And I'll show you pretty much how we say thank you. But we'll see what the mitzvot are going to have. Emor will help us understand what to do with the mitzvot. But the main thing that Mishpatim is telling you, I want to see you in my office because I want to make sure we don't follow other gods because we just made a covenant to serve the one God. Got the idea? Yeah, I want to connect that to the theme of Matan Torah and the laws of Matan Torah, like the short set of laws of Mishpatim, which are primarily setting a just society and having the holidays, how to serve God and the bookends. Nice and simple? But I can't run a religion with some opening statements like that. You follow? Oh, see me in my office. I need more details. But Mishpatim is just very general. We're going to get more laws coming up. Now, if you follow your Chumash, like chronologically, where's the next time we have laws about holidays? Before Kitisa. Listen, let me explain you why. I hope you follow this. This is really complicated that you follow. What's the name of Shavuot in Perek Chav Gimel? What's it called? It says V'chag HaKatzir. Okay? What do you call it? Read me the pasuk. In pasuk, Bikrei Maseh Asher Tizra Basadeh. Okay? V'chag HaSif B'tzeit HaShana. Why can't it be called Shavuot at a time like now? If I say celebrate Shavuos, it makes no sense. If I say Chag HaKatzir, it makes sense, because when do you celebrate Chag HaKatzir? With your grain harvest. Assuming there's one season of grain harvest. Same thing with Asif. I don't need a lunar date. And I know what time of year it is. If I say celebrate Shavuot, what's that mean? When? There's no... it's got to be logical. Now, you mentioned Kitisa, which is about 120 days later. Kitisa, yeah. Kitisa is after Chet Egel, right? Kitisa? No, for sure. Kitisa is, the laws in Kitisa are after Moshe gets the second Luchot. Right? Yeah, for sure. For sure, yeah. It's after the whole story. It's in Kitisa, it's after Chet Egel. Look in Kitisa, Perek Lamed Daled. In Lamed Daled, remember Perek Lamed Daled begins, we read on fast days. God tells Moshe to come up and get the second Luchot. And then he comes down with the second Luchot. But when he gets the second Luchot, he gets some extra laws again. He doesn't have to repeat the laws of Mishpatim. He has to read the laws that even though you sinned, because I can forgive you now, you're still welcome to visit me. And therefore he repeats, after we get the second luchot, Midat HaRachamim, he repeats the laws of between God and man. And now we have to remember Elohim Masechah Lo Taseh Lach. See that? Pick up from Pasuk Yodalet, I think. What's it say there? Yud Zayin? Yeah, it's Chag HaMatzot Tishmor. Listen carefully now. They read. Ki b'chodesh aviv yatzatem miMitzrayim again. And then Kol Petah Rechem Li. Okay. I'm repeating pretty much the laws of the holidays. Now listen to what Shavuos is called now. Keep reading. Okay, here we go again. Why is it called Shavuot now? Isn't that baffling? What does Shavuot mean?
It was after Moshe came down with the Luchot.
Okay, but what? How can I call a holiday Shavuot without explaining it first? So I'll tell you a little secret. Okay, when Moshe was up for the first 40 days, before Chet Ego and everything, Moshe received a set of laws on the first 40 days. You know what those laws are? Moshe repeats them for the last time in Sefer Devarim. Listen carefully, because it's really confusing, but it's as simple as could be. According to Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Chumash, the laws that Moshe teaches in Sefer Devarim are not new, they're 40 years old, and they're the set of laws that came together with the Ten Commandments on the first 40 days on Har Sinai, before Chet Egel. That's why there's no Mishkan in Sefer Devarim. You understand? Right? The laws in Devarim are the original set of laws that came at Har Sinai. And they simply take the laws of Parshat Mishpatim and expound upon them. More detailed, they're laws, basically Parshat Mishpatim are a quick set of laws for your community, and Devarim is taking those laws, applying them to a nation. I have a king and a judicial system, and a local court system, Shoftim v'Shotrim, and a Supreme Court, and laws for going to war, and who's drafted, who's not drafted, economic system. It's much more complicated, but I have like 20 chapters of laws instead of 3 chapters, but more for a nation. But the laws in Devarim, Moshe explains his introduction, are laws he received 40 years ago. Got it? With the first Luchot, before Chet Egel. And therefore, which holidays are we going to find in Sefer Devarim, in Parshat Rei? The Shalosh Regalim again. Understand? Now, open up Tet Zayin, Perek Tet Zayin, in Devarim. Devarim Perek Tet Zayin. And we're going to find, guess what we're not going to find? Which holidays are we not going to find in Sefer Devarim? Why? Because I can't talk about Yom Kippur before Chet Egel. Understand? The whole concept of Kippurim only begins once God has Midat HaRachamim. Yom Kippur only, what I call Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, only begins with the second Luchot. You with me? But the laws in Devarim are the first ones. Look how we take Perek Tet Zayin in Devarim. I'll give you an example in case you know your what the Bible critics say. Remember when we learned this in Chutz La'aretz, second day Yontav, we begin with Kol HaBechor. Now, who does the Bechor go to? Who eats the Bechor in Devarim? You eat it. Right? It doesn't go to the Kohen yet. In Vayikra it goes to the Kohen. Why? Because before Chet Egel, there was the Shevet Levi wasn't separate. Everything changes after Chet Egel. So the laws in Devarim reflect the original set of laws, which are changed. Again, I want to get into the details in Devarim, but once you understand that, it solves almost all the problems of all the critics on Devarim. But I'm saying, what Moshe is teaching in Devarim is the first set of laws, the pristine laws that came. We don't paskin by them, but we keep them like the Constitution. If we want to change it, we have to make an amendment, if you know your American law. Now, why am I doing all this? Because look at the laws now in Devarim. There's one key theme. Remember? Look how they begin. Perek Tet Zayin, the first 8 psukim is what holiday? Pesach and Chag HaMatzot, and make sure to keep it in the spring. Remember? And what do you do in the spring? Shmor Chodesh Aviv Pesach Hashem. And what's the main thing? What's the Chiddush of Pesach? We know about matzah and everything. Where do we celebrate Passover? Not at home, but where? B'makom Hashem Yivchar Hashem. And I might think Lachatchila, but maybe I can do it at home anyhow. And then Chumash says, don't even think about it. Okay. And maybe I'll shecht it and bring it home? No. Minimum 1 night stay. Remember? Those 8 psukim are focusing on where do we celebrate Passover, B'makom asher yivchar Hashem, which happens to be a mega theme in Sefer Devarim. Understand why? Because Devarim is against Bamot and breakaway minions. Now they want one central place of worship, and they were worried about Bamot. The second you make Pesach at home, you start a Bama, you start a breakaway minion, and no one will come to Yerushalayim. Anyway, that's the whole theme for Devarim. Now,
So the Makom was given before Chadega.
for sure, that's because there's no Mishkan, because I don't need a temporary portable temple, because ideally we should go right to Israel, send it to we should go from Har Sinai right to Israel, and set up a permanent temple in the ideal way. The need for the portable temple is because of Chet Egel. You with me? Yeah.
If we're talking about Dvarim, and just before they come into Eretz Israel, and everything that's happened has happened, wouldn't it make sense for him to give the final compilation of what's actually going to happen?
It would make sense, but Moshe doesn't do that.
Why?
Because Dvarim are principles, right? I gave you the example for the American Constitution, right? Things have changed since 1776, but we don't change the Constitution, do we? We amend it. Got the idea? But I still studied the Constitution as it was given, because I derived from them principles. And therefore, Devarim, Moshe says in the beginning, this is what God told me on Har Sinai. You can say 1,000 times it's Moshe's interpretation. Moshe doesn't say that. Moshe says, this is exactly what God told me. He's not making anything up. He's not giving anything. He said, now, he's adding comments, historical comments, and Musar as he tells the laws. But the laws are 40 years old. That's why there's no Midat HaRachamim in Devarim. It's only El Kana, Poked Avon. Anyway, that's the share in Devarim. Now, you can argue it doesn't make sense, but write a letter to the editor. But he explains Devarim. I'm talking about the law section from chapters 5 to 26. Just read it. He said, everything I just told you, Moshe Rabbeinu says in chapter 5. Word for word. He says, these are the laws that God gave me on the first 40 days in Har Sinai, together with the Luchot. Now, why am I doing all this? Because during the first 40 days, look at Pasuk Tet now. What did God tell Moshe Rabbeinu? See Pasuk Tet? Shiva Shavuot Tisparla. Now, no, from when? When do I count 7 weeks? See Pasuk Tet in Parak Zayin? Count 7 weeks from when? From the beginning of your grain harvest. As soon as your sickle starts cutting the grain, okay, count 7 weeks and make a holiday and call it weeks. Now, once I've said that, I can talk about Shavuot. So Moshe got the definition of Shavuot when? On the first 40 days. Got it? Now, what's the main mitzvah now? What do we have to do on Shavuot now? Who has to be happy? And not just you, but your workers and the Levite and the stranger, often it makes all the people who don't own land, who aren't so happy anyhow. And the way you share the way you thank God for your grain harvest is by sharing your happiness with those who don't have. And what's the proof? Look at Pasuk Yudvet, the finale. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt. Oh, that's so 7 weeks ago, isn't it? Why am I mentioning, remember you were a slave in Egypt with Shavuot? Because Shavuot is about making other people happy. Because the way you thank God for your grain harvest is by bringing the people who don't have with your happiness. It's not you being happy, it's sharing your happiness with others. That's there's a whole Megillah about it, called Ruth. Yeah. What?
And sure, in Yerushalayim.
And where everyone comes and gathers and thanking God. But remember, we gather to thank God, but the way we thank God is by just saying thank you, but acting thank you. We'll see that theme over and over again on the holidays, especially in Emor. We'll see it in Emor in a minute. Now, once I define Shavuot this way, now after, when Moshe gets the second Luchot, what can God call it? Shavuot. Now you understand why we did all that? It's really... And it makes sense now. Got it? I'm saying we're so used to how it's being called Shavuot, but if I don't have Pasuk Tet, Shiva Shavuot Tisporlach, Mechal Chamesh, about counting 7 weeks, I can't call holiday Shavuot. Now, why am I counting weeks? Because the theme of a week is the theme of what? Of 7, which goes back to creation and the God of nature, who created nature. And therefore, during my grain harvest, which is basically your life stay, because if our grain harvest fails, we're finished for the year. In fact, what happens when there's not enough lechem? When there's not enough lechem to eat for everybody, what happens? There's a war, right? What's the word for war? And what's hiding in milchama? Lechem. You knew that? Milchama is... Now, if you have family connections in Egypt, so you can go to Egypt and get bread. I had great-grandparents there's a whole book about them. that they did that when there was a famine in Canaan. But if you don't have family connections in Canaan, you're stuck.
How long did it take to get to Egypt from here?
Back then, a week or two. They got stuck on the way back a little bit. Yeah, they were there for a couple hundred years. They were planning just for they were going on shlichut for a couple years there, and they stayed there for a couple hundred. Okay. Now back to but you understand the Devarim now. And then what do we have? Sukkot. What's Sukkot now? It's not called Sukkot. What's it called in Pasuk Yud Gimel? Chag HaSiv. In how many days? 7 days. And the same mitzvah of what? V'samach leBachagecha. Where? B'makom asher yibchar Hashem. And make other people happy. Okay? And then even you can be happy. Remember Beitach Sameach? The song just sort of ruins it. Remember when we sing V'samach leBachagecha and we go right to the end. We go from the beginning of Pasuk Yud to the end of Tetvav and skip all the important stuff in the middle. And then, and what's the summary in Pasuk Tet Zayin which you know by heart? 3 times a year, what do you celebrate? B'makom asher yibchar Hashem, and that's what Devarim is about. Got my point? Okay. I want to get, in light of that, we can go now to Emor. Not yet, but I understand why Shavuot is called Shavuot now. Now, there's another set of laws that we know very well in Sefer Bamidbar, right? Parshat Pinchas. I just want to identify the unit. I want to explain why we're skipping it, okay? Open up Bamidbar Perek Chavchet, which you know by heart. Tell me why everyone knows it by heart. Right? It's the laning for Rosh Chodesh, which we lane sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a month. We quote it in Musaf, don't we? Every time there's a holiday, and we take out either one Sefer Torah or two, either the only Sefer Torah we take out, or the second one is always we're reading from Parshat Pinchas. When we daven Musaf, it's always from Parshat Pinchas we quote. Always word for word. Got it? Now, what's the topic in Parshat Pinchas? The topic is not the holidays. The topic is? No, the topic is the Korban Tamid. Okay? So it's the regular routine sacrifice that Am Yisrael brings in the temple. And then every day a little lamb, one in the morning and the evening. Come Shabbat, what do? You double it. And then when it comes to Rosh Chodesh, God wants a shmorg. Okay? Now, that's going to be Rosh Chodesh. Remember, we bring 2 parim, 1 ayah with 7 kvasim, and we bring a sir lachatat. And the same thing then we have that's Rosh Chodesh, then we have Pesach, Chag HaMatzot, and we do the same thing. Remember Ka'ele, the same korban for 7 days. Okay, now, because this is a calendar basically for the Gabbai in the Beit HaMikdash, what's he need to know? I need to know exact dates, don't I? So therefore, what are the dates here? So every day, every 7 days, everything. On Rosh Chodesh, which is the beginning of the month, I bring a special korban. And then on the 14th day of the first month, Pesach. On the 15th day of the first month, Chag HaMatzot. Got it? Now, can I have a lunar date? And I'm going to have a lunar date for Rosh Hashanah, don't I? Look how Perek Chavtet begins. B'Chashvi b'Chad l'Chodesh, right? And then B'Esor l'Chodesh HaShvi. And then B'Chamishasar l'Chodesh HaShvi. It's as technical as could be, nice and organized for a change. Nice and thing. But why can't I have a lunar date for Shavuot? It depends on Rosh Chodesh, how many days Rosh Chodesh is. And therefore, how do I call the holiday? What's it called? Uvyom HaBikurim. What's it say? Bakrivem Mincha Chadasha L'Hashem. Because I can't have a lunar date, but I'm going to connect it to when the 7 weeks over, B'Shavuot Techem. Which means, Bamidbar is aware of the Devarim, isn't it? So I can't call it B'Shavuot Techem. I'm trying to show you why the laws of the Devarim had to be given beforehand. Now, when the laws of Bamidbar were given, they were definitely given earlier. We'll see later on. But that's the daily. I think there's a Korban Tamid was given at Har Sinai, wasn't it? Give me a proof. Ola Tamid Hasuya B'Har Sinai. Remember, it's back in Parshat Tetzaveh, before Chet Egel even. The Korban Tamid, and most likely the add-ons we'll see later on. Now, I want to show you how we identify a unit. Okay, look how Perek Chavchet begins. How does it begin? By Daber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Sabet B'nai Yisrael. What's the next word? V'amata lehem. Okay. When does God finish talking to Moshe Rabbeinu? Find me when God finishes talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's all Perek Chavchet, all Perek Chavtet. And what should Moshe do after God tells all this to Moshe Rabbeinu? What should Moshe do? If God told Moshe, Tzabet B'Yisrael B'Amat Alehem, yeah? Now, find me that pasuk at the end of Perek Chavtet. Actually, it's the first line of Perek Lamed. Vayomer Moshe. Siva, isn't that a perfect match? I want you to appreciate how to identify a unit in Chumash. You see that unit? The unit begins, Tzabet B'Yisrael B'Amat Alehem, dot, dot, dot. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu all the laws. And what's Moshe do when it's over? Vayomer Moshe, Kochashir Tzivaoto. Perfect unit. No dibors in the middle. All the holidays. Perfect for a yeki. It's nice and organized. It really happens in Chumash. It's so nice and organized. Now, but these laws had to have been given earlier. We'll prove it in a minute. Because Parshat Emor is assuming we know these laws, because in Emor it's going to say, on the holidays, Vikrafta Mishal Hashem. And it's referring to these, for sure. Got it? Now we're ready for Parshat Emor. Oh, just for the fun of it, the holidays in Pinchas don't have their names. This is really cool. Not the part, but just listen. It doesn't call the holidays by its name. It describes what we do on the holiday. Look at Chag HaMatzot. What do we do every day? We bring a Korban Tamid. It's not called Chag HaMatzot. What's it called? Pesach, and then on the 15th. Then say Chag HaMatzot. What's it called? Eat matzah for 7 days. It doesn't say celebrate Chag HaMatzot. It says eat matzah for 7 days. You with me? Now, what do we do? What we call Yom HaBikurim. Bakrivem Mitcha Chadasha Hashem. Now here's the fun one. What's Rosh Hashanah going to be called? Okay. What do we call it in davening? Yom HaZikaron, right? It's Yom HaZikaron, isn't it? And we'll see in a minute that's what we called it in Emor. What's it called here? Yom Teruah. It's not called Yom HaZikaron. Why? Because that's what we do on the day. That's not what the day's about. That's what we do on the day. You with me? So therefore, Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Teruah. That's what we do. Is Yom Kippur going to be called Yom Kippur? Of course not. What's going to be called? Yeah, what's it say? V'nitem et nafshotechem. You catching on? It's like awesome, huh? And the Sukkot won't be called Sukkot. What's going to be called? What do you do? L'chagotem. You celebrate. It's called a chag. Is that cute? It's just cute. It explains why there's a difference. But consistently, what is in Pinchas? What we do on the holiday, but doesn't define the holiday. Now, why did I do all that? Because guess where we define the holidays? In Emor. Now, we whittled it down. Now, Emor is the place where we have all the holidays as a unit. Got it? Now we're ready for Perek Gimel and Parshat Emor. Oh my gosh. We're good? You've heard what we did so far? I wanted to put everything in. I wanted to give an overview of how Chumash presents the holidays. It's so much more. Isn't Shulchan Aruch so much easier? Of course it's easier, but I can't learn core values from Shulchan Aruch. I can be a robot, right? But I can't apply them in new situations, etc. And if I want to be sort of cute, halacha is how to live your life, and nevuah is how to lead your life. Understand the difference? Like you need both, but I need a guidebook for the workers. Let's say you passed your medical test. If you're a doctor, there's a procedure for there's a procedure, isn't there? You have to follow? Or like if you're a rabbi, the rabbi's guidebook from the RCA, everything's there, if you know what I'm talking about. But basically there's procedural laws you follow, but if I want a patskin, you follow? It's not enough just to take the guidebook. I need to understand what the sources are and learn the principles. Now, and then I can make up new guidebooks. We do that every couple hundred years. Now back to Parshat Emor. In theory, I should have a nice organized unit. Now look how Perek Gimel begins. It's really, again, we're all familiar with this. But Perek Gimel, I'm giving you a warning. It's complicated, but it starts out nice and simple. Because what's the opening line? Again, by Daber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Right? No, Daber Bnei Yisrael v'amat elehem. Moadei Hashem asher tikra lem mikori kodesh elhem moadai. Now, remember before Tzavet Bnei Yisrael v'amat elehem. What's it say? Daber Bnei Yisrael v'amat elehem. So when this is all over, what does Moshe need to do? Vayomer v'daber. Vaydaber. Now, guess where this is all going to be over? This opening line again. God tells Moshe, Daber v'sabamat alehem, Mo'adei Hashem echritam. Look at the last line of Parashat Gimel, and you'll get a smile out of you. Everyone, see the last time we all know by heart? Vaydaber Moshe. Now, why did Chazal pick that for Kiddush? It's way too short, isn't it? And they call it Kiddush Rabbah. That's what do you call it? Euphemism? What's it called? Lashon Sagi Nahar. But why did we pick that line? Because that line is summarizing all Parashat Gimel. And when do we say that line for Kiddush? On Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, all the holidays, all the Moadim. Not on Rosh Chodesh, because there's no Rosh Chodesh here. And Rosh Chodesh doesn't fit into this unit. Why not? We'll deal with it later on. What? You don't make Kiddush on Rosh Chodesh. That's why it's not here. Okay. You could. You do. If you have to eat on Yom Kippur, you make Kiddush. Now, back to... so in general, what should I find now? I have a dibur in the beginning, don't I? Daber b'nei Yisrael. And it ends with Vaydaber Moshe b'nei Hashem. And what should not be in between? I shouldn't have another dibur. What's the problem? I have a whole bunch of them. I have to explain why. You with me? Now, let's go back to the opening line. Daber b'nei Yisrael. Go back to Pasuk Aleph. Pasuk Aleph Bet. Daber b'martelem Mo'adei Hashem asher tikrutem mo'ikirei kodesh elhem mo'adai. The word mo'ed, what's the shorish of the word mo'ed? What's the three-letter shorish hiding in mo'ed? Vav Ayin Daled, which means, what's a vad? A vad is the, what do you call it? Vad is a committee. Why? Because they meet. Now, if I want to meet someone, I need to set a time, don't I? But va'ad, like a v'ida, is a conference. If I want to set aside a tent to meet someone, if I want to make a tent a meeting, I'll call it an Ohel Moed. And therefore, if Mo'adei Hashem are times to meet God, but Moed doesn't mean time, it means meeting. Got it? Mo'adei Hashem is a time to meet God. And therefore, where are we going to go on the Moedim? We go to, and when there's a Mishkan, you go to Mishkan, we go to Shul, or Chazal say go to your Rebbe's house sometimes, don't they? The same idea. But the idea is it's time to meet God. Now, how come Asher Tikro Tam Modam? How is that different? What's it mean we call them? How do we decide when the Modim are? Because we decide when Rosh Chodesh is. We don't decide the holidays, but the actual day of Rosh Hashanah depends on Beit Din, doesn't it? Am Yisrael decides. And if rabbis argue over when's Rosh Chodesh, remember there's a whole story about it, remember? Some guy almost got fired because he thought he could paskin for himself. And the big guy told him, come to me with your, you come for a staff meeting? And Yom Kippur. Now, if you got the joke, fine, we're not going to go into it. Now, back to, now, therefore, the next line should be the first Moed. What do we have instead? Shabbat. Tell me why Shabbat cannot be a Moed. It's got nothing to do with the moon. It's not a set time, because ever since we started Shabbat, every 7 days has been Shabbat, and we come for the last 4,000 years, we've been keeping up pretty good on that.
And there's no mitzvah to go to the big.
That's right, there's no... Now, are we supposed to gather on Shabbat?
No.
Sure you are. You're supposed to gather to learn Torah and to have a Kiddush. What do you call gathering? Mikra Kodesh. Mikra means to call out. You set aside a time for gathering. In English, it's called a day of holy convocation. I have no idea what that means. But it means Mikra is to call out. You're calling out, time to gather. Now, Shabbat is a Mikra Kodesh, but it's not a Moed. Now, we just said Moedei Hashem Mikra Kodesh, and before I get to the Moedim, what did I talk about first? Shabbat. What did I say about Shabbat? We're supposed to work 6 days a week, and the 7th day, what can't you do? Let's say 6 days a week, you can't work a 7th day, and what can't you do for sure? You can't. They say what Malachi just says in general, right? Or it gives an example. What? You can't do Kol Malacha on Shabbat.
Wait, so why is Shabbos connected then to the Moed?
It's not.
But it started it, but it didn't.
So they do this. So they do this because of Kiddush Friday night. I'll explain why in a minute. Okay? Because look in Pasuk Daled, where the Moedim begin. Eila Moedei Hashem. That's excluding Shabbat, isn't it? So see the opener? These are the Moedim, to call them, Moedei Hashem. Parentheses, Shabbat. And then these are the Moedim. Now, to appreciate this opener, we have to go back to Perek Lamed Hey and Shmot, just to see how Chumash works, okay? To answer your question. Perek Lamed Hey, Parshat Vayakel and Shmot. Probably you know it by heart. The opening line, the first Aliyah, people are more familiar with. What happens in Parshat Vayakel? Moshe gathers the nation together for what reason? What's all Vayakel Pekudei about? From the beginning of Parshat Vayakel, there's one major topic, which is putting the Mishkan together, right? Which begins with the commandment to gather the nation and tell them to build the Mishkan. But before I start working on the Mishkan, what do I need to tell them? Understand? Right? No, I'm signing a contract with my contractor because we're living in Englewood. We're remodeling. It's been 3 years. That's not nice. Okay. I shouldn't do that, should I? But I'm in a Jewish neighborhood. So what I do, I tell my contractor, you have to finish within, in time for Pesach. I mean, Pesach is going away, but in time for the school year by September. But what can't you do? You can't work on Saturday because the neighbors will get angry. Understand? But it's in the contract. But I tell them up front. So I'm about to build a Mishkan, which is for who? Is it your work or God's work? No, you're making a Mishkan for God. And the Ten Commandments says, what might somebody think? Melechet Shemaim is okay. I'm just quoting the Gemara for you, right? So, because I might think that what? That building the Mishkan is more important than Shabbat. So before Moshe tells the people about to build the Mishkan, parentheses, so look what it says. Moshe gathers the people together. It tells them, Eila hadvarim asher tzivasem lasot otam. What's that referring to? In Pshat. Eila hadvarim asher tzivasem lasot otam. It's building the Mishkan. Parentheses. You can work 6 days. You can't work on Shabbat, especially making fire to melt down gold and stuff. And then, Pasuk Daled. Now it says, here's what you have to do. Got it? So therefore I have a header. Here's what you need to do. Okay? Parentheses. You can't work on Shabbat. Now here's what you need to do. Understand how simple it is? I'm just explaining to you a Ramban, which is a lot longer. Actually a little shorter. Whatever it is. But you understand how Chumash works? I'm about to tell you something, but before I tell you the details, you need to remember Shabbat overrides. Makes sense? Now, what the coolest thing is how the Chazal darshan Eila Hadvarim. Eila is 36, remember? In the Gematria. Dvarim is 2. Hadvarim 3. They get to Lametet Malchot. But that's a Menamik. That's called a Drash. It's not Pshat, but it's a beautiful one. That's a whole different story. Now, back to... now, keep that in mind, and now go to Perek Gimel. And I'll explain to you what the Ramban says. What's the Ramban say? We're about to explain the holidays, and you'll know very well that what can you do on Yom Tov that you can't do on Shabbat? Men can smoke, women can cook. Remember? Pretty much. In the old days, at least. Now, what? Yeah. Now, seriously, everyone knows that you can do malacha on Yom Tov. Which kind? Certain malacha. Olcha nefesh, right? It says so in Shmod already. But what? What happens when Shabbos comes out on Yom Tov? Or Yom Tov comes out on Shabbos? What might I think? What? The Yom Tov, remember I say Dochalat say? And maybe for Simchat Yom Tov, it was so important to eat on Yom Tov. We know how important that is. That what if Shabbos comes out on Yom Tov, what can I do? I can cook. And maybe Shabbat is more important than Yom Tov. What's it coming to tell you? Before I guess Shabbat is always more important. Now, some people have a beautiful custom to invite the Shabbos queen to their table Friday night. You know that custom? Yeah. Okay. And they make a toast before the meal starts. They take a cup of wine or sham, whatever it is, and first they thank God for sending the queen, and then we talk about how great the queen is. Who's the queen? What's her name? Shabbos. Remember? We say 3 things about how great Shabbos is. What's so awesome about Shabbos? It's Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit, isn't it? How do we know that? The 10 Commandments in Shmot, right? It's also Zecher Desat Mitzrayim. That's the 10 Commandments in Quran. But it also says it's Tchila L'Mikrei Kodesh. Some people had Kihu Yom. It's always in parentheses, isn't it? If you do Nusach Sfardi, you don't even mention it. You ever see that? Remember Kihu Yom Techila, but Kihu Yom is in parentheses. You'll see why in a minute. Because it should be 3 comments. There's 3 praises. It's Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit, Tchila L'Mikrei Kodesh, and Zecher L'Set Mitzrayim. What's Tchila Mikra Kodesh mean? It's referring to these lines right here. What's it saying? Shabbat is so important. It's more important than Mikra Kodesh. Why? Because it's the introduction to Mikra Kodesh, which means it overrides. I don't say that Kiddush on Yom Tov, do I? If Shabbos comes on Yom Tov, I don't do the Shabbos Kiddush. I do. Yeah, Yom Tov overrides. I don't want to embarrass Yom Tov. But on Shabbos, what I talk about, I praise Shabbat. You're more important than Yom Tov. Don't you say that in Kiddush? Now, most people say by heart, have no idea what they're talking about. Agreed? Okay. Now, that's the Kihu Yom sort of messes things up. But I don't want to get into the nusach of usually what the Edot Mizrach always have it better. But that's a different class. Now, you understand now, why does Chumash put, because Kiddush was written first, wasn't it? And to make Kiddush make sense, we had to add these two psukim. I'm just joking. Got my point? I was just joking for my answer. Now, I'm sorry. Now, you understand what Chumash was doing now? I'm starting Moedei Hashem, parentheses Shabbat, and now Eila Moedei Hashem, pasuk Daled. Now, Moedim, by definition, need a lunar calendar. And therefore, what's my lunar calendar begin with? B'chodesh HaRishon, what day? Barbato, it's Pesach. And on the 15th, Chag HaMatzot, nothing new. Except for what? There's only one thing we added we didn't know from Shemot. It's Mikra Kodesh, Kol Melechet Avodah Lo Tasu, and Vikraftem Mishal Hashem. All the holidays in Emor have those three: Mikra Kodesh, Kol Melechet Avodah, and Vikraftem Hashem. Vikraftem Mishal Hashem is always referring to what? Parshat Pinchas. With me? Which means Parshat Pinchas had to be given earlier. The laws in Pinchas. Make sense? Because it's assuming you know that. That's Vikraftem Mishal Hashem. We can prove it in a minute. Now, Mikra Kodesh means we gather to talk about the holiday. But Shabbat, it says Kol Melacha. On Yom Tov, it's Kol Melechet Avodah. You know what the difference is? It's real simple. It's what you call a bank holiday. You know what a bank holiday is? The market is closed. Right? No businesses. Now, why do we have bank holidays? In every culture has bank holidays. Why? Bank holidays will be Independence Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Shopping Day, whatever. You know, but they're always national holidays. If the banks weren't closed, it wouldn't be a holiday. Got my point? In order to enable a holiday, to make it meaningful, so for people to gather and talk about the holiday, what do I need? I need to close the office. I need to close work. That's why Yom Ha'atzmaut, everyone knows about. Yom Yerushalayim is only for people aged 15 to 25 with people surgot and jean skirts. You follow? No one else knows about it. Am I right? Because it's a work day. Do we have school on Yom Yerushalayim? The big machloket among, thing. And we're going to trade it for Live Bomer. Because Live Bomer no one comes to school anyhow. Now. Where? Exactly. That's why there is school because people go to work, and we need babysitters. I don't need schools don't teach the kids. It's babysitting. You know that. Now, back to we learned that in Corona, didn't we? Now, back to the holidays. I'm sorry. How did we get off track? I was telling you something important. What? Oh yeah, Kol Melechet Avodah. What makes Shabbat Shabbat is refraining from all creativity. So Kol Malacha, what makes Shabbat Shabbat is what's called Shvitat Malacha. The second, remember, I'm kadam myself Shabbat. You can't work. That creates Shabbat. Yom Tov, not working doesn't make Yom Tov. It enables Yom Tov. Understand the difference? And therefore, the main thing I'm not doing is my office is closed. Business is closed. That enables Yom Tov. And therefore, there's no reason why you can't cook. Now, go define what melacha that is. That's hard. So Ramban says melacha shebesadot. He calls that. That's basically the marketplace. That's regular work. But now, when it comes to defining, so the rabbis don't want to make it so complicated. So they take the lamitet melachot and they pick which ones are roch nefesh. Okay, but that's a shir in halacha. But thematically, the underlying purpose of Isur Melacha and Yom Tov is totally different than Shabbat. Make sense? Yeah.
But right here it says Kol Melacha Avodah Lo Tasu. But didn't you say that only says that for Shabbat?
No. Kol Melacha is Shabbat. Kol Melechet Avodah is Yom Tov.
But this is about Yom Tov.
It says Kol Melechet Avodah.
Ah.
That's right. Kol Melechet Avodah is always Yom Tov. Kol Melacha is Shabbat.
Okay.
Guess what we're going to find in Yom Kippur? Kol Melacha. That's why we know Shabbat. That's why Yom Kippur is going to be like Shabbat. Now, back to, so those are the three things. So there's no Chiddush on about Chag HaMatzot except for what? Except for Birkat Mishal Hashem and Kol Melechet Avodah, which we already know from Parshat Bo. Now, why can't Shavuot be one of the Moadim? What doesn't Shavuot have? It doesn't have a lunar date, so it can't be a Moed. And therefore, it's not the next holiday. What's the next holiday with a Moed? I'm going to skip Pasuk Tet to Chabet. You with me? See the Dibor? Look how Pasuk Tet begins. A new Dibor. It has to be a new Dibor because it's not part of the Moedim. This is an insert. And this could be anywhere in Chumash. What's it say? God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, when you come to the land of Israel, when you come to the land of Israel and you begin your harvest, as soon as harvest begins, takes the first barley that comes and wave it like a trophy, and then count 7 weeks and talk about Omer every day. That would be the second shir today. Got that? Now, that has nothing to do with the moon or the lunar calendar. In Pshat, correct? It doesn't belong here. What did Chumash do? It inserted it into the Moedim. So right now it's an insert. Got it? So from Pasuk Tet to Pasuk Chabet is an insert. You with me?
No, wait. Are you saying,
I'm running out of time, aren't I? What?
Are you saying Shavuos, you don't have to go to Yerushalayim?
No, that's in Dvarim.
But, so it's in Dvarim, but that does not mean that you do have to.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about sometime becoming to Yerushalayim. Yeah, I'm talking about a date. The date of doing Sfirat Omer. We'll get to it. We're going to do that the second show. I'll do this in detail. All I'm saying is this is not an integral part of the Moedim because it doesn't have a lunar date. It's inserted. Got it? Now, so that's from Pasuk Tet to Chabet. Pasuk Chav Gimel. What do I have? B'chodesh Hashvi, B'chad b'chodesh. Yedechem Shabbaton Zikron Torah, and then Kol Melechet Dodot Tasu, and Birkat Mishal Hashem. Nice and simple. What you guys call Rosh Hashanah. And then Vasor l'chodesh Hashvi Hazeh Yom Kippurim. Got that? Now, but I need a new dibor now because I picked up because I had an insert. Then I have a new dibor for Sukkot, which gets really complicated. Not for now. What am I trying to tell you? But Tet to Chabet is an insert. Now, what did Chazal learn from that insert? That I have to connect Sfirat Omer to the Moedim. You with me? I'm trying to explain why the Stukim are wrong. Even though I'm one of them. No, I'm just joking. What did I say? You understand what I'm getting at? But when I look at the unit, the laws of Sfirat Omer are not a Moed because they don't have a lunar date. But because Chumash inserts them into the Moedim, what do the rabbis learn from there? I have to connect Sfirat Omer to the Moedim. So what Moed should I connect it to? It's next door neighbor, which is what? Chag HaMatzot. And therefore, when do we start Sfirat Omer? On the Shabbaton of Chag HaMatzot. Right? Which is the day of, and therefore, Mimochat HaShabbat, Chazal understand, is not a Sunday, but after the first day of Yom Tov. Not it? Yeah.
Having another
Yeah?
teaches us that the previous thing was an insert, then why does Sukkot also start by
because once I have a new dibor for Rosh Hashanah, I just spin it. Now, I knew the dibor for another reason also. We'll see why. Because Sukkot has a double presentation, which we don't have time for. But Sukkot is really complicated. I'll just end with this real fast. I'll show you where the Moedim end. Because Sukkot has this double nature. Sukkot is a Moed. It's also an agricultural holiday. Moedim are going to be historical, we'll see. Because the moon and history go together. Look at Pasuk Lamed Gimel. That's the dibor for Sukkot, right? When do we celebrate Sukkot? We have a lunar date. B'chodesh Hashvi, on the 15th day of the month. What do we have? Chag Sukkot, on the first day Mikra Kodesh, and Yom Hashmini Mikra Kodesh. Got that? Pasuk Chav Gimel Chav Daled Chav Hei. Got it? Okay. And then Birkat Mishal Hashem Yom Hashmini Atzeret, also Mikra Kodesh, and we're done. They're called Mikra Kodesh. Pasuk Lamed Zayin, the Modim are over, aren't they? What's the proof? Ele Modei Hashem. And what do? Lakri Vishel Hashem. Right? What Dvar Yom B'Yamo? That's referring to Parshat Pinchas, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, now that I finished summarizing all the Moedim, Pasuk Lamed Tet. Oh, I forgot something. What did I forget? On the same 15th day of the 7th month, I have another holiday called Chag Asif. Got it? And now we have a Shabbaton as opposed to a Mikra Kodesh. Shabbaton, that goes back to agriculture and Shabbat. Because and then I have Arba Minim. Understand? And then I finish up, then I close the whole thing up with Modei Hashem at the end. And the reason for that's too complicated. But it's what? But yeah, but that's all. But if I follow the structure, remember envelope structures? Modei Hashem header, Shabbat, Modei Hashem. I finished Modei Hashem, Shabbat, Modei Hashem. Did you catch that? I wish I had a board. Got my point? You see what's happening? I have a board. Oh, is there a marker? Oh wow, look at that. Oh my gosh. Well, my RBA. I had Modei Hashem, Shabbat, and Ele Modei Hashem. And then when it's over, remember Pasuk Lamed Chet, Lamed Zayin how did Lamed Zayin begin? Yeah, Ele Modei Hashem. And we have all the Chagim. Ele Modei Hashem. That cleanses that up. And then we have Sukkot as a Shabbaton. Right? And then we have Modei Hashem. Vaydaber Hashem, Vaydaber Moshe. This is Vaydaber Moshe Modei Hashem. Got it? It's the second you understand envelope structures, all these strange things begin to make sense. Not everything's envelope structure, but some of them are. We have to finish up because you follow what we did today? Yeah. Now, the next year, I'm going to go focus on Shavuot itself and the section that we skipped because Shavuot is coming up. But the main thing is to appreciate Parshat Emor, I need to see where all the other holidays are in Chumash and how this one ties them all together. And here I pretty much define what Rosh Hashanah is. It's Shabbaton, Zichron, Teruah. Got it? Sukkot I have much definite. Sukkot Teshuvah, Shivat Yamim, Arba Minim, etc. Yom Kippurim I get a definition. Not just what we do on it, but what the day's about. Yom Kippurim, etc. So I get more definitions of the holidays as opposed to what we do on the holidays in Pinchas. But that was just an overview of Parshat Emor, and I never gave out the source sheet. I'm sorry. Here, we need this for the next year anyhow. So during the break, we'll pass that during the break. This reviews what we did, sort of. And we made the source sheet really for this year, for the upcoming year. But let's just give you one back. But we'll take a 5-minute break. Here we go.
The Israeli
No. Yeah, take it.
No.
An extra one? Over here. Take.
No, you.
What? Oh no, take this over here. Okay. Good. Send this to you.